By the time Gordon Kinkaid claws his way back down to his skiff, his palms are torn open, his lamp is nearly dry, and he hasn't said a word out loud in 3 hours because some part of him is afraid of what might answer. It's April of 1909, the Colorado River running low and green through canyon walls that block the sun by mid-morning, and Kinkaid has spent 11 years running this stretch of water for a surveying outfit that pays him to chart depth. Nothing more, nothing stranger. He's climbed canyon walls before. He's never seen a shadow cut into solid rock at a perfect right angle, 400 feet above the waterline, in a spot no flash flood or frost crack could have carved. He beaches the boat on a gravel shelf barely wide enough for both boots and starts up the rock face, fingers bleeding into the orange sandstone dust, gnats working at the sweat on his neck, a hawk screaming somewhere above the rim like it's trying to warn him off. Twice his boot skids on loose scree, and he catches himself with a forearm that will bruise black by morning. What he finds at the top is a doorway. Square cut. Man-made. Taller than he is. Inside, his own breath turns to fog in the beam of his carbide lamp, and the air smells like wet iron, and something older, something sealed. The passage ahead is wide enough for 3 men walking shoulder to shoulder, worn smooth down the center in a shallow groove that only comes from feet, thousands of them, over more years than he wants to count. He follows it a quarter mile through side chambers and dead ends, his arms aching from holding the lamp too high for too long, until the walls fall away into a hall so big his lamp can't find the ceiling, and his own voice comes back to him twice when he calls out into the black. Rows of seated stone figures line one wall, arms crossed, faces worn to nothing. Copper tools sit green with age near a cold fire pit ringed in stone, and past that, shards of pottery unlike anything traded or sold anywhere in this part of the continent. Kinkaid crouches and picks one up, turns it over in fingers that are shaking now for reasons that have nothing to do with the cold. If any of this is real, everything he was ever taught about who got here first and when is wrong, and somebody made sure nobody ever found out. Whoever buried that secret never counted on people like you still digging around in old newspaper archives 100 years later. And that's exactly why I need 30 seconds of your time before we go back down into that chamber. If you've made it this far, you're the reason this channel exists. Full stop. Hit subscribe, turn on that bell, because these are exactly the kind of stories the algorithm quietly buries under cooking videos and celebrity gossip. It doesn't reward channels that ask uncomfortable questions about the official record, so every subscription, every notification you flip on is one more person the feed can't hide this from. Consider it your ticket back into that room. Now let's get back into the dark, because it only gets stranger from here. Kinkaid didn't sit on what he found. Within weeks, he wired a contact at the Smithsonian Institution, and the man who took the case was a professor named S.A. Jordan, a strange pick for an American canyon dig since Jordan's actual specialty was Egypt. Jordan financed a return trip that same year. 30 men, mules, 6 weeks of supplies, and what they hauled back out reads like an inventory that shouldn't exist. A tunnel system, Jordan put it, close to 12 miles. Branching into chambers built for ceremony, for storage, for living. A central hall big enough, by his own count, to shelter several thousand people at once. Statues in 2 distinct styles, some cross-legged like carvings out of the Far East, others standing with arms folded in a pose lifted straight off Nile funerary work, and a third kind Jordan noted separately in his private files. Faces sanded down flat, like someone who came later wanted no record of who they'd been looking at. The team hauled out 148 stone tablets carved in symbols close enough to hieroglyphs to unsettle Jordan, but matching no dynasty on record, as if the alphabet had drifted an ocean and a few thousand years off course. Men who handled the tablets said they were heavier than stone that size should be, dense in a way that didn't sit right in the hand, and cold even after hours sitting in the desert sun outside the entrance. Copper blades held an edge nobody in 1909 could explain, and when one crew member ran his thumb along a blade to test it, he opened a cut that reportedly took 3 weeks to close. Mummified remains turned up wrapped in a style unlike anything out of Egypt, sealed into niches along the corridor walls, and one man on the crew swore the linen still smelled faintly of something sweet, like resin, after all that time. One smaller chamber, set apart from the rest, held nothing but a granite altar, stained dark along one edge, and a single copper bowl at its center, positioned so precisely in the middle of the floor that Jordan's own notes describe pacing it out 3 separate times just to be sure his measurement wasn't off. None of this stayed quiet. On April 5th, 1909, the Arizona Gazette ran the whole story on its front page, and papers picked it up as far away as Nevada and New Mexico within the week. For a short stretch, this was simply the news. Then it wasn't. Here's where you stop taking my word for it. Pull up a satellite map of the Grand Canyon right now and read the names on its temples and buttes. Isis Temple, Tower of Set, Cheops Pyramid, Horus Temple, Osiris Temple, Buddha Temple sitting a few miles from Shiva Temple, and Confucius Temple. Those are official, government-surveyed names handed out by American surveyors in the years right after Kinkaid's expedition, men who had every excuse to name those rock formations after presidents or local ranchers, and instead kept reaching for the gods of Egypt and Asia, year after year, survey after survey. Ask a ranger why certain backcountry stretches of the canyon are closed off and you'll hear unstable terrain. Ask which stretches, exactly, and watch how fast the conversation wraps up. Some of those closures sit nowhere near any documented erosion hazard or protected habitat, and a few have stayed sealed for longer than most other backcountry restrictions in the entire park system. The Havasupai and Hualapai, whose knowledge of this canyon predates any American survey by thousands of years, carry their own oral histories of tunnels below the rock, and a people who went down instead of leaving when things got hard. Those stories never make it into a park brochure, and they rarely get airtime next to the official geological explanations. One strange coincidence is easy to shrug off. A dozen of them, laid across the same stretch of rock, gets harder to explain away, no matter how many times the word coincidence gets used. The unraveling happened quiet, then all at once. When reporters and amateur historians started writing to the Smithsonian directly, asking for anything on Jordan's expedition, they hit a wall. No professor by that name on staff, no excavation on the books, nothing in any ledger, any file, any photograph. That's still the institution's official position. The whole thing was invented to sell papers, and neither Kinkaid nor Jordan ever existed outside of print. A denial doesn't tie off every loose thread, though. People near the rim described crates hauled out under armed guard within the year, moved at night on roads that saw almost no other traffic, tarped so heavily that nobody could say what was underneath. One guide who claimed to have led a follow-up party back to the cave decades later said soldiers showed up within days of his visit, packed the entrance with blasted rock, and altered the cliff face enough that even people who'd once known the exact spot couldn't find it again. He said the crew that did the blasting wasn't local, and none of them spoke to the townspeople who came out to watch. A handful of photographs said to have circulated among Jordan's backers have never turned up in any archive collection or auction house since. Not even a scrap of a negative. And at least 2 collectors who claimed over the years to own prints later admitted, under pressure, that they couldn't produce them. And Kinkaid himself just stopped appearing anywhere. No death certificate under his name in Arizona's records from that period. No further mentions in print, no letters, no land deeds. A man with over a decade of documented work on the books vanished from every paper trail almost overnight, and there's nobody left alive to say whether he was silenced, paid off, or quietly erased by someone with the authority to do it. I've gone back to Jordan's inventory more times than I'd like to admit, and one detail always stops me. That smaller chamber, set apart from everything else, holding nothing but a stained altar and a single copper bowl. Like whoever built that hall wanted one room, nobody else was allowed inside. If even a sliver of what he cataloged turns out to be real, there's a space under 2,000 feet of sandstone that hasn't seen daylight since before anyone thought to write things down. and it's still sitting there right now, sealed off, waiting on nobody, while tourists 2,000 feet above snap photos of a butte named after a god most of them can't place, never once wondering why that name was chosen in the first place. If this story moved something in you, share it with one person, just one. The official history of this country is missing chapters, and the only way those chapters get written is if enough of us refuse to stop asking. Until next time, keep looking at the shadows.